For Session Update, I'm Shannon Lurkey. Noting that at least 21 threats have been made against Minnesota schools in the last several weeks, Governor Mark Dayton presented his proposal to increase funding for school safety enhancements and for additional mental health services for troubled students. The governor's plan would provide an additional almost $16 million in flexible new money, as well as $5 million in grants for additional support services. Here's that press conference.
School safety is understandably on everyone's list of concerns presently, and the tragedies happen in Florida and elsewhere is a grim warning to us that we need to do more. We need to be ever more vigilant to protect the safety of our students and their parents and teachers and other school staff who shouldn't be risking their lives, but are in this modern United States, unfortunately, taking risks just to come to school, and that's got to be unacceptable in Minnesota. We all have a responsibility, and I have a mission to prevent school tragedies from occurring. And I don't know if this is a complete solution. I said before, I'm open to considering anything and everything. And I think we'll find some areas of bipartisan accord with the legislature, which will be essential to enacting any of these measures. And there'll be others where I expect they will not be supportive, at least the majorities. So I've put this into two categories. One is what we can offer the schools to strengthen their resources and their ability to provide protection and provide supportive services. And the other is applies to the schools, but applies to this entire state in terms of tightening up our gun restriction measures so that we're not exposing our citizens, all of them, students, adults, and everyone, to the kind of atrocities that have occurred. With regarding what I call the Safe and Secure Schools Act, the three major components. One is a grant to school districts. Some have suggested this be a levy. I'm certainly willing to consider that for the next biennium. But if we want to get this money to put it to use in the next school year, starting next fall, it needs to be grant money, and it would provide basically $18 per student for dedicated for additional school safety measures. Right now, $36 per student is provided. This would be $18 per student with a minimum of is $25,000? 20. There's a minimum for the smallest school districts to get it started. And I hope the legislature will pass this so we can put this money to use in the beginning of the next school year. Also providing an additional $5 million for mental health grants to school districts. It's really obviously important that we do a better job as a society of identifying people who are in need, people who are isolated, people who are possibly prone to acting out behaviors. When I was on the Senate Armed Services Committee, George Tenet, the director of the CIA after the aftermath of 9/11, and I remember this because, of course, I'm a hockey goalie. He said, if you're a hockey goalie and you make 40 saves and let one in, that's considered usually a good night. He said, in my line of work, it's considered a catastrophe. And similarly with our schools, one failure is catastrophic. On our streets, one failure is catastrophic. So we have a big task to try to identify people before they commit these terrible acts and get them the help they need. And that's what these next two items are focused on. The student in Florida, in hindsight, he was expelled from school. He didn't have a family support system. He didn't really have any support system. And in isolation and got to be terrible emotional distress, he committed that terrible act. So these mental health grants, in addition to the $13.5 million that the legislature and we have provided previously. There would be an additional $5 million to allow that mental health grant program to school districts to be expanded. And we also need to tighten up the law and the responsibility of school districts and also county social service providers. When a student is expelled from school or is induced to leave school, we can't just let them go off into the streets, into wherever they're going, and again, create the climate where this kind of terrible isolation and distress is going to only intensify and be more likely to result in some violent acts. So we need to tighten up the legislation that requires schools and social service providers in those instances of expulsion or forced departure to make sure that there's follow-up social and mental health services being provided, and the third measure would do that. So those are the areas that I've noted where I think we can, I hope, reach bipartisan accord. I noticed that Representative Loon, chair of the House Education Committee, proposed expansion of mental health grants yesterday. That's great. And I look forward to working with her on those measures. The others are aimed at reducing gun violence throughout our state and our society. And I put these separate, and I want them to be submitted as separate legislation. Some measures have already been submitted, others, but I want to put them separate from the proposals I just made previously, because these next ones, the legislature's already indicated are not going to go anywhere. The House and Senate leaders, Republican leaders, both said that they're not interested in changing state laws in any of these regards. The bill that was brought up before the House committee last week was tabled right away. They don't even want to talk about it, much less act on it, which is really shameful. But it is the reality, and I don't want these measures, while I support them, to prevent this other legislation from going forward. So this would require criminal background checks on the sale of all firearms in Minnesota, not just by to licensed dealers, but private sales, as well as gun shows. I've supported this for several years now, closing the gun show loophole, which is just an obvious path for those who can't qualify for firearm purchase and possession to go somewhere else and walk right in and get whatever they want. Limit the purchase of assault rifles to people older than age 21. It would provide what's called the red flag law for individuals that are determined by a court to be a danger to themselves or others, family members, or fellow students, or wherever it occurs, so that again we're trying to prevent these disasters before they happen. And similarly, if and I get told this is on statute but not being properly enforced by the courts, those who have found guilty of domestic violence and other crimes of violence, particularly against women, but against all family members, should be prohibited from purchasing and possessing firearms. And that needs to be enforced. We need to look at the law, see what's preventing that from happening now, and close whatever gaps remain. So those are the essence of my proposals. I'm very grateful that the superintendent of the Orono schools, Superintendent Orcutt, is here. There you are. Not just so quiet, baby. So I told the superintendent that I went to the Orono public school system in kindergarten, first and second grades. And my school, where first and second grade, is now an historical museum in Long Lake. I say you know you're really getting old when your elementary school has become an historical museum. But you've encountered firsthand the last couple of weeks some of the terrible aftermath of what's occurred and what's circulating around. And thank you very much for coming and sharing your experience.
Thank you, Governor, and good morning. Well, in Orono on February 21st, learning stood still for nearly 6 hours of lockdown for all students and staff on the campus of Orono schools. We were facing a serious shooting threat to our campus. It was not specific to one building. For hours, we worked closely with multiple police forces, our trusted Orono police, and the FBI, as these groups narrowed a very broad investigation to the realization that the threat was coming from inside the school campus and inside one of our schools. And eventually, the same day, they made an arrest. While I cannot share further details about the ongoing investigation, I can tell you it was serious. And I can tell you we were prepared and we had best practices in place, but we need more. We practiced drills and simulations with police and other law enforcement agencies. We have communication teams. We have effective design for communication and frequent communication. We utilize trained threat assessments as we view individual students in need. We have security upgrades to facilities that have accomplished over the last few years, and we need more. We have mitigation. We have great counseling and support services in every building that are trained and collaborate with clinical psychologists and experts in the field of mental health, and we need more. We have a long, ongoing positive relationship with our Orono Police Department and school resource officers. All of these strong attributes we had going for us that day did not assure nor comfort the parents of these children that spent a full day under a threat and a lockdown. We have great empathy and compassion for everyone who endured this day. What we achieved together, the police, the staff, the parents, the communities of Orono schools, and our students was incredible. But the energy needs to be spent on learning. And we were fortunate. We need to give more support to schools in safety and security needs. We need to improve funding to mental health efforts for children and teens in schools and find ways for facility management in security areas. We need support for the children of Minnesota to be educated safely as we figure out how to meet the challenges of keeping our schools free from harm and free from threat. We support the governor's proposal for school safety, and we thank him. Orono schools were lucky. All children need to be safe and lucky. Now I'd like to turn it over to Eva Goldfarb, from St. Louis Park Schools.
Thank you, and thank you to Governor Dayton and his office for allowing me this opportunity to speak today. My name is Eva Goldfarb. I'm a junior at St. Louis Park High School and one of the many teens taking part in this movement to reform gun control for the better. This movement that we've created is one of determination and passion, but it is also one of frustration. It's been inspiring watching my peers and teenagers all over the country work so hard to spark change, but it's also been heartbreaking to see that hard work wasted in the hands of adults. It's been frustrating to watch necessary bills be voted down and tabled, to watch as our lawmakers refuse to hear our voices, to watch as they weigh the worth of our lives and weigh them far too low. So if it seems like we're disappointed with the lack of action from some politicians, it's because we are. We are beyond frustrated and beyond heartbroken. Fortunately, this disappointment is not a sentiment felt towards Governor Dayton among other elected officials because of what he plans to implement to reform gun control. I would like to thank him, not only for listening to us and agreeing, but for taking concrete steps to fulfill our demands. Like I've said before, we aren't stopping until thoughts are replaced with action and prayers replaced with laws. I'm appreciative and grateful for the actions and laws Governor Dayton is proposing, and I hope other politicians will see this as an example for the things we want. Additional funding for school safety and mental health resources, better processes for students being expelled, increasing the age to buy assault rifles, universal background checks, laws that prevent domestic abuse offenders from getting guns, and more. They aren't a one-and-done solution to the problem, but they are progress that is helping step by step. These are changes that are essential to addressing all forms of gun violence, and in the future, I hope to see further changes that will address the disproportionate level by which people of color are affected by gun violence, so that everyone can feel safe in their homes, schools, neighborhoods, and communities. I listed off these proposals because I want people to know the measures we want to be taken so that they can fully understand the measures we don't want to be taken. In other words, arming teachers. It baffles me that this proposition is even in discussion, but since it is, I feel the need to share on behalf of myself and the majority of my peers that we do not want this. In a class discussion recently, we debated this topic. One of my classmates, who was a victim of gun violence, had to run out of the class crying just at the thought of armed teachers. If the discussion of guns is enough to make her feel uneasy and unable to learn, just imagine how having actual guns in the classroom would make her feel. We don't feel safe as it is, and this would only exacerbate our fears. Like I said before, this youth-led change is full of determination, passion, and hard work, and that is inspiring to me. But I don't want this movement to last because I don't want gun violence to last. I don't want us all to be passionate about this issue because it shouldn't be an issue. We shouldn't have to keep fighting for something so essential as our safety. So to Governor Dayton, I thank you. And to all other politicians, I challenge you to reform gun control as quickly as possible. This fight has been going on for too long, and even though we will never tire, we shouldn't have to keep fighting for our lives. Please help us end this before it happens again. The time is now. Thank you for your attention.
Eva, young people with the kind of courage and articulateness that you expressed here gives me hope for our future. So thank you very much. Thank you, Superintendent. And answer questions on this subject and then go on to others.
Is your plan to take these funds from the surplus, Governor?
Yeah, with the budget forecast provides additional funds, yes. So this would be a general fund appropriation for both the additional school safety measures as well as for the expanded mental health grants.
Are these, the way you're structuring this, are these grants the school districts would have to apply for, or are you basically trying to spread it out through all school districts across?
I make it available to every one of them. I'm willing to do that, but I'll work with the legislature to see what they're willing to support. But to get this started, I think that's, well, I should take it back. I'm sorry, the school safety is, I put in that category. The mental health grants, the $5 million won't cover everybody who should and needs to be served, so those are provided on an application basis.
Governor, the proposal to use school maintenance revenues that was advancing in the Minnesota House, is that workable, or do you believe that new money, fresh money is what's necessary?
I don't rule anything out, but I believe that we have additional money, and this should be one of our very top priorities for a proper expenditure of it.
Governor, what are your thoughts on arming teachers?
I think Eva said it very well. Well, first of all, I should say that under Minnesota laws, principals can allow teachers or other school staff to bring firearms into the school. So it's already open to that at the discretion of the principal. I'm not looking to I do not favor expanding that. I think Eva said it very well. Walking down the halls and wondering who carries a firearm is not conducive to feeling safe and also to learning.
Governor, if a bill that did expand that reached your desk, would that elicit a veto?
I'm not going to comment on hypothetical legislation.
Did you talk to the leaders yesterday about any of this?
We focused on other subjects. We talked to them previously. I mean, again, actions speak louder than words. And in fact, the words of both House and Senate leaders right after the Florida tragedy occurred said that they didn't think there was any need or, in fact, I don't want to take their words, but anyway, they weren't going to act on it. And one of them said we would talk about it in the session, and then last week it was clear they don't want to even do that. They just wanted to table the measure and put it out of the way for the session. I hope with the appeals, Eva and others who she said shouldn't have to be here fighting for their lives, that they will reconsider that and give these measures serious consideration, put them up to votes. Put them up to votes, which is exactly what they don't want to do, the leaders. Put them up to votes so people can see, you know, whose priority is the NRA and whose priority are students' lives.
Governor, how do you, there's obviously not much of an appetite among a number of lawmakers for some of the proposals that you're making in terms of gun background checks and some of the others here on your list. Have you got any plans on how to get leverage on that this legislative session? Will you link it to something else that Republicans want, or can you do anything more than simply use the bully pulpit and try to get them to do something on it?
I haven't really discussed that with the support of legislators to see what's possible. I'm certainly willing to do whatever I can to increase the pressure, and we need to develop a legislative strategy. But ultimately, they're going to make decisions that they're responsible for, and again, that they should be held to account for by their constituents and by the citizens throughout Minnesota. What's their priority? The lives of real people, including our students, or the ideology of the NRA? Anybody have a question of our two guests here?
Madam Superintendent, as you look at this potential funding, what would you recommend to be improved or enhanced at your schools?
We need flexible funding. No two school districts are the same in terms of what they might need at this point in time. So funding we need to stop trying to take away from current funding to meet our safety and security needs. That's what we've been doing in the past, so we need new dollars, and we need them to be flexible dollars.
I would agree with both of those. What do you need to build safer in your school?
Kind of what I listed off. Mental health resources are very necessary and very essential, and obviously that is not the whole problem. The problem is guns, and I think it's not really an either-or thing, and I think working with both of those problems is really essential to solving the whole problem in general.
And I would agree with you. It's not either or, it's both.
Are the students in your school pretty much in agreement, or are they, like population as a whole, split up on that subject?
I can't speak for everyone. I think for the most part we are in agreement that we do not want armed teachers and that we do want to feel safer than we currently do right now. I know there is some range in students' opinions, like anywhere.
I'm kind of on the front lines of this with your students there, your fellow students. What do they generally think about the level of violence that is available in society? I'm talking about on the internet, on television, and other media. Is there any discussion of that at all among your fellow students?
There isn't a big discussion among my peers and I that may be contributing, but like I said before, guns are the biggest issue that we are facing, and it's not what we see just in the media and in video games and everything.
If I can just pursue that a little bit further, are you saying that if guns are out of the equation, then that's going to resolve this problem, or do you feel that the violence in general and the tendency toward violence in society needs to be that issue needs to be dealt with?
Obviously, violence can be carried out in other forms, but guns are weapons whose sole purpose is to kill, and so we do feel that guns are the biggest thing that we need to focus on right now.
Eva, can you tell us about what kind of security measures are currently in place at your school, and if there's anything in particular in the suggestions that are laid out in the governor's proposal that you feel might make your school safer?
I'm not sure about the details of the safety measures that are currently in place at my school, but I do think that what Governor Dayton is proposing will help my school and other ones. Sorry, I'm not sure about the specifics.
I would agree with the superintendent that we have over 2,400 school buildings in Minnesota, and probably each situation is unique and different, and it should be, first of all, additional money, so we're not taking money away from other important needs in the schools, but and it also should be, again, flexible so it can apprise the situation and respond to it.
Other topics?
Can I have both the guests answer one more question?
Yep.
Do you feel safe in school now?
I do not. No, I do not. I know some of my classmates do, but I know the majority of us do not, and I think we're all very scared and very tired of feeling scared.
Superintendent?
I believe we have safety measures in place. I think that students should and can feel safe in schools. But we do know from what has happened on a national level that there are certain things that we need to pay more attention to.
Thanks. Move on to another topic.
Okay, anything else?
Favorably to the proposal on nitrates. You say it's, this needs to be driven by farmers rather than administrative rule. I'm wondering if you have a response to that.
Well, I think as Commissioner Frederickson said yesterday, there are a lot more farmers who are, because of financial considerations and just the recognition that it's really an inefficient use of nitrate fertilizer and animal manure to be putting it on in the fall where it's not going to be absorbed by plants and where it's going to be often just carried away by the next spring's runoff. So we're not asking anybody to do anything that they think is unwise or uneconomical, but we would like the vast majority of farmers to recognize the wisdom of this approach and help us save our waters.
Everyone good? Great.
All right, thank you.